One of my great-grandmothers, several generations back, was a medicine woman recognized by her tribe as well as two other tribes. And she was involved in a lot of healing rituals to help people overcome physical illness, spiritual illness, deal with stress from assaults, sexual assaults, witnessing violence, loss, death of loved ones, many cleansing and healing ceremonies. And I am really fortunate that I am in possession of some of her journals. I'm also in possession of her first Bible and her notes in that Bible as she was transitioning and conforming to Christianity and trying to meld those two worlds apart and still honor her culture, but also embrace the Christian faith and belief in God and prayer, but then also understanding that those healing rituals, those practices were key and had proven to be effective. You know, she lived well past 100 years old, as did many of the women in the bloodline, and they were farming and active up until the day they died because they understood the importance of healing and maintaining balance with physical and mental and spiritual health, and had many practices in diet, nutrition, plant-based solutions, herbal remedies, spiritual rituals, things that they did to stay healthy and well in all capacities. And one of the rituals that they would partake in several of the tribes, this was honored, as well as the Lakota tribe, was primarily associated with this practice, but her tribe also embraced it. And it's a practice where there was a tangible effort to acknowledge pain, acknowledge burdens, acknowledge suffering by physically taking rocks, claiming the pain, speaking out what they had endured, whether it was violence, the loss of a child, something traumatic in their life, feeling the weight of that pain tangibly, speaking it out, and then releasing the rock into the river to release that pain, to let it go from them. And I think this is a beautiful practice, and in Western medicine today we see a lot of tangible practices in mental health care that are similar in nature, you know, writing out painful things and then burning it, or whatever the practice may be. But this was something that was key to the culture to release painful burdens. And today is a really special day because many who are targeted individuals who have been victimized by gang stalking are bravely coming forward and posting videos to share their stories. And this is a very courageous thing to do when you fully understand what many of these victims have been through. I share a lot of my story through various videos on my channel, but today it's more about empowering those who are claiming their voice and helping them to speak up. And certainly those who are making videos are welcome to copy and paste the links to their personal videos underneath the comments of this video so they can be contained together, because it's really important that the public understand what is happening here. People are still actually saying gang stalking is not real. It's like saying, oh yeah, corruption isn't real. Fast food isn't unhealthy for you. It's like time to pull our heads out of the sand already. There are countless, thousands upon thousands, in multiple locations all over the world, of cases of individuals who are experiencing what I'm about to explain today. And it's essentially a situation where a group of people, a community of varying degrees, people in a church group, a community group, a workplace, a friendship group, family system, whatever the case may be, decide that this person over here is different from us. We don't like them. We're jealous of them. We want something that they have. They're telling a truth or speaking up or being a whistleblower, and we don't like the truth they're speaking. We simply don't like the way they dress, or they have tattoos and piercings and they don't fit in to our church community. We're judging them because we don't like their lifestyle, we don't like their belief system, we don't like the color of their skin, gender bias, discrimination, simple disdain for another person, intolerance, or it's financially motivated. We want what this person has. You know, in my situation, that's very much been the case. I am a whistleblower, but I'm also at the root of a lot of envy and attacks on me because of my bloodline and mineral rights and things that have been stolen from my deceased ancestors and from me attempting back when I was a child. So it's been a lifelong experience of being a targeted individual, but it definitely amplified the more I started snooping around and trying to figure out what was going on and speaking out about what was happening to me. But today it's more important for me to highlight the stories of other targeted individuals. This is real, this is happening, and you can do something about it if you're approached. If someone comes to you and makes it seem innocent, that they just need some information about a person from you, or tell me what you know about them, or hey, could you watch them and tell me what their activities are and kind of monitor and track them, you may be being asked to participate in a much larger scale crime than you realize when you agree to participate in what might seem like, oh, it's just harmless gossip, or we're just circulating these rumors that we heard from our friend or our coworker or this lady at church. But the truth is, you may actually be participating in a very large-scale felonious crime situation by choosing to engage. And I think it's so important that the public become more aware of what is happening in these cases and what a targeted individual endures, what daily life looks like for a targeted individual. And there are several things you're likely to hear about in the videos that are being posted today by many targeted individuals who are bravely sharing their story. And it's a huge risk. It takes a lot of courage because they have had a lot of efforts to silence them, to isolate them, to discount their credibility, to attack their reputation. So to speak up takes a lot of courage. And I would encourage you, if you come across a video of someone who's doing so, to offer your support, to be better, to choose to be a good person. And some of the things that you might see and hear on some of these videos, some of the topics are notably similar in all of our stories. Many of the types of crimes that we experience, the hate crimes, the discrimination, all of it is very similar. It's almost a patterned orchestration of abuse, of community abuse that we experience, and there's a sense of predictability to it. There's a layer of, or multiple layers of corruption. There's often systems that are used and abused and triangulated, whether it's the court system, the legal system, healthcare system, postal system. There's a lot that is utilized to engage in this very comprehensive plan to destroy another human being simply because we don't like them. We want to discredit them because they have relevant information. We've stolen from them and we don't want to get caught. We've committed crimes and we don't want to get caught, so we need to make sure no one will listen or believe them, or we need to make them disappear. And these crimes, are attempts on someone's life in many cases. There's definitely efforts to cause not just emotional, psychological harm, but also physical harm. So these are very serious cases, yet they're not being treated as such. So it's really important that we bring more and more awareness, that we speak up, and that we start recognizing reality. And the optics, the narrative, the false narrative is a huge component in these cases. The goal of the gang stalkers, the bullies that are participating in this, is to change the optics of how the situation is being seen. They're trying to paint that targeted individual as being problematic, as being a bad guy, and yes, let's all grab our pitchforks and exercise vigilante justice and drive them out of town and bully them. We'll just bypass the legal system and do it ourselves. We believe this is our right because we're community members and church members. We are above the law, and we're going to attack and terrorize and abuse this person because they deserve it. And the reality is no one deserves to be abused. And if you're thinking that somebody's a bad person, therefore it justifies you being a bad person, it might be time to do some self-reflection. But there is often a false narrative that is painted about the character of the targeting, the smear campaign, the bullying, the stalking. And the smear campaign is heightened gossip. It's gossip on a level that is unimaginable, because the rumors aren't just chitter chatter. This is slander that places the victim's life in danger. It causes others to want to harass and physically harm them, and there will be no full recovery of their reputation, employment, acceptance in community. Their life is permanently damaged, if not destroyed, because of the depth of the smear campaign. The allegations are usually very similar. There's attacks on the mental stability of the targeted individual, claims of substance use, sex work, promiscuity, sexual misconduct, abuse, attacks on their parenting, attacks on their lifestyle, attacks on their stability, attacks on their personality and character, and just all around attacks on every facet of the target's life. And the momentum that is created by that smear campaign results in a mob mentality, where without even thinking, without even critical thinking or fact checking, groups in large numbers will jump on board this hate campaign and feel that it's appropriate and justified to attack the poor victim that's the subject of this false narrative, that may not even know what's going on or why until it's blowing up in their face. But that mob mentality, the momentum behind it is extraordinary, because people that you think would never be participants in this, people that you think are trustworthy and respectable in the community and hold high titles, will join in, turn a blind eye, support, and enable this horrific form of community abuse. The mob mentality phenomena warrants further video. I'll speak on that on another topic, another day, because it's something that is mind-blowing when you realize that church communities, community leaders, the victim's own family will participate in this abuse, because the lies in the smear campaign, that false narrative, is so damaging and so destructive that people lose all sense of judgment and just jump on board. There'll be church groups, workplace involvement, community, neighborhoods. Everyone will get involved. It becomes a whole community, a large group of people against one person who is helpless and isolated without any help, being attacked, often unfounded, no good cause for it, just huge numbers of people. And it could be online, people that the victim doesn't even know will participate, or they've had one conversation with them 30 years ago and now they're talking like they know the victim well and they're familiar with their lifestyle and habits, and they just make up these bogus stories and scenarios. It's like they should be storytellers with some of the things they come up with. But the goal is to get the victim isolated, because once the victim's isolated, no one will help them. They can't call law enforcement for help. They'll go and report and try to provide evidence, and they're just seen as, oh, we've already been told that they're crazy, or they're the problem, or they're, don't listen to them. So the victim becomes completely isolated. And then what happens is these community bullies can really go at it, because nobody's going to help them, nobody's going to believe them, and then the abuse ramps up, the crime level ramps up. And in isolation, abusers obviously can get away with much more. And narcissistic abusers use this tactic in relationships, whether in an intimate partner relationship, a family narcissist relationship, and generally in these community bullying attacks, there's always an abusive narcissist at the helm, most generally, whether it's a family member, a parent, a sibling, an aunt, an ex-partner. There generally is always an abuser that's been part of the victim's past that is furthering the abuse and triangulating large numbers of people to help them abuse the victim so that they can sit back and keep their hands clean. They'll use the systems, they'll abuse through the court system, through endless litigation, false investigations. It's a very notable tactic used by abusers. They will use handlers, send in fake people to befriend, to enter into relationships, to pretend to have a love interest, to be a friendly coworker or boss to the victim for the sole purpose of gathering information to report back to the group. So it becomes a situation where the victim doesn't even know who they can trust anymore, because anyone that comes into their life is there with bad intention, just to gather information to help the large community bullying efforts. So again, that isolation and lack of support. So the victim's already starting to go through all of these things by themselves with no help, no one to talk to, no support. Then the privacy violations. This is where we see the hacking. This is where we see the unlawful recording, breaking into the victim's home and placing recording devices, getting into their protected records, their HIPAA protected records, violating all kinds of privacy rights, hacking into their email and their communications, thinking that the targeted individual somehow is not deserving of their legal rights, their human rights, and they just get trampled all over by those participants in the community bullying. This can involve cyber crimes, exploitation. Often a handler is sent in to get photos, recordings, images of the victim to exploit them. And this may be on catfish accounts online, creating false profiles, placing the victim on dating sites or on sex working sites to depict the victim in a false light to affect the optics the way the group would like them to be affected. Because then, oh, see here, this victim's on a sex worker site, they're promiscuous, they don't deserve their inheritance, or they're deserving of us slashing their tires because look at them, look what they're involved in. It's the most deceptive, manipulative tactics, and it really is baffling when you find out who would be involved in this kind of activity. There's interception of communication and mail. Often those of us who've been through it have had our mail intercepted or rerouted. We've had our communications on our devices intercepted, or emails. We never receive texts or emails. Or there's communications as if from us through false accounts. When they've cloned our devices, hacked our Wi-Fi, they will fabricate activity on our devices or cloned devices as if we're communicating and portray us in a false light when the victim has no idea what's going on. It's demonic what they do. False claims and setup attempts. There's often false claims made to law enforcement. There's efforts to set the victim up for crimes, to make them look a certain way, to plant things, to entrap them, all sorts of nefarious activity, because the goal generally is to get the victim locked up or institutionalized, because then it's much easier to support that false narrative, to control the optics, see they're crazy, see they're a criminal, everything we did to them, all these crimes we shouldn't be punished for because they were deserving of it. That's how these community bullies justify their activity. There are stability attacks. There will be efforts to contact the victim's place of employment, their landlord, their neighbors, try to run them out of their housing and make the neighbors all skeptical and fearful of them, get them fired from their job. They'll follow the victim and make sure they're blacklisted and can't ever get employment, no matter what they try to do. They'll drain their resources by causing property damage, so the victim's constantly putting out money to repair things, broken windows and damage to their home or their vehicles, so that they don't have resources to get adequate help. It's very strategic. There is healthcare involvement, whether mental health care, rather regular health care, even dentists get involved in this, where there will be altered medical records, fraudulent medical records, where the victim's never even met a provider yet has been diagnosed with who knows what, even though they've never even been seen or evaluated by someone. And then those false medical records will be presented in a hidden court case or circulated online. HIPAA violations, the release of records to the abuser, to the stalkers, all kinds of privacy violations and fraud can be involved in these situations. And more often than not, I have very few targeting stories that I've heard of that didn't involve an element of this. Tampering with consumables. So there's often unlawful entry given to our residents, whether it's break-ins or the landlord just giving people keys and letting them come and go as they please. Whether they're tampering with cosmetic products, food, anything consumable, they'll try to lace, drug, poison to make the targeted individual sick, to cause physical harm to them. You know, I ordered a burger one time and the burger was full of staples. I mean, that's how widespread the community involvement was in my attacks. Harm to pets and animals. A targeted individual has to work very diligently to keep their pets safe. It's not safe to go outside for them, let alone their pets. It's not safe to go for a walk. You'll be followed and harassed and verbally accosted. There's a lot of harm to people who have farm animals, chickens or whatever. You know, they will do harm to animals and leave them on the porch or in the yard of the targeted individual, basically as an unspoken threat. Property damage, very common to have damage to our vehicles, tampering with our vehicles, getting underneath the vehicle and cutting brake lines, cutting parts, slashing tires, windows smashed out, trying to cause an accident for the victim. There are often hidden court cases where the victim's due process rights are violated and they're not even invited to their own court case where they're the main character, whether it's mail interception or court staff is involved with making sure the victim is not present or served, or they'll falsify notaries for power of attorneys, give false conservatorships, give it to somebody who's in a pretend marriage or pretend relationship with the victim, someone the victim doesn't even have contact with. You'd be amazed at the lengths that will be done through the court system, through the legal system, where people will actually lie, provide false testimony, false records, totally creating a brand new character, a brand new story about who that targeted individual is, that is the complete opposite of who they really are. And that's why it's so important that they get them in isolation. They don't want anyone to actually see the victim, that they're functional, they're healthy, they're doing well, they're capable, they're competent, because they've painted such a false narrative and dug themselves in a very deep hole through all of these other criminal acts. And so it becomes really important to keep that targeted individual quiet. And that's when it gets very dangerous. There will be intentional delay of justice, even investigation. You know, if law enforcement has had involvement, and unfortunately, in many of our cases, there has been law enforcement involvement. And that's not to say there's not good and honorable law enforcement out there. There certainly is. But sadly, there's either a non-response when a targeted individual goes to law enforcement and says, here's evidence, here's footage, here's my logs of all of the vandalism and property damage and all the things that are happening to me, and there's no response. There's not proper justice for the victim. And what that does is send a message to those bullies, those targeters, that they can keep going. And it gets worse and worse and more dangerous for the targeted individual. Many of us have had to flee for our lives because of the non-responsive law enforcement. And the goal really is to blacklist the targeted individual, because if the root of the targeting is envy, they never want the targeted individual to thrive or succeed. If they've painted or portrayed the target as being incompetent, they certainly can't have them get a job or have stable housing. They've got to have them be unstable to destabilize them in all capacities. The goal of the targeters is they want that targeted individual babbling homeless on the streets, making no sense, nonsensical and non-functional, because then it's like, oh yeah, we were telling the truth, and everything we did, you know, you can't believe what they say, you know, they're crazy. Why would you believe that we would do any of these things? Very manipulative. And often the goal is that the victim be unalived. The goal is that the victim will do it for them, do it for themselves, take their own life by totally smearing and destroying their reputation. They're alone. They have no support, no love, no affection, no care, no concern. Nobody cares about them, not even their own family. They're being robbed. They're broke. They're just trying to survive day by day. And imagine what daily life would look like when you're going through all of this. It'd be hard to stay happy, to stay positive, to feel like there's purpose, to even keep going forward. And that's what they want. They want the victim to take their life, because then they can get away with what they've stolen. They can get away with their crimes, and they can feel justified in all of that ugly and awful bullying behavior and carry on in their job titles that have allowed them the resources and access to engage corruptly and abusively and abuse that power, take advantage of that power imbalance between client and patient, or in a court setting, misuse their authority on the bench, things like that. So a targeted individual has a lot of stones thrown at them, and they carry a lot of weight. And I would encourage you to really give heart to what they're opening up and sharing today, because it's an opportunity for them to release some of that weight. And if they could receive some support, which they don't get often, that would be an added blessing, I'm sure, to a lot of targeted individuals, because basically many of us are taking all those stones, all that rubble, all that demolition of those who have caused so much destruction to our lives, and we're trying our best to rebuild a new foundation while we have people coming and trying to knock that foundation over constantly and throwing stones at us. But I think the solution in a lot of capacities, there are many things that need to change. There's dire need for resources and proper investigation of these crimes, and to treat these hate crimes and these attempts on our life with the severity that they deserve. But the truth of the matter is, we've all been commanded, let he who is without sin cast the first stone.